Yeah, and that actually, like, made me think of, did you I'm sure you've, probably spoken about and dug into the study that came out earlier this year where they were looking at ketogenic endurance athletes that and then they were comparing them to, the essentially the same group with a washout period on a high carb diet, and they controlled energy intake to the degree where neither of the groups gained weight, so we sorta could rule out some of, like, the weight gain side of potential problematic outcomes that can kind of muddy the waters a little bit, and they found that, like, 3 out of the 10, uh, individuals in the study actually had, like, pre-diabetic levels when they
Mm,
were at weight maintenance on a moderate to high carbohydrate diet, and I was thinking to myself, it's like, well, that's really interesting because, like, most people would probably assume at, like, a calorie controlled diet or a weight maintenance diet, moderate to high carbohydrate, that person shouldn't have pre-diabetic levels of fasting blood glucose, but here we were 3 out of the 10 there, so there was either some sort of thing going on with those participants where within the context of endurance plus the carbohydrate required to maintain weight at I think it was like 65% of their intake or somewhere around there.
mm.
They found themselves with a problem, and all that went away when they switched to I think their ketogenic diet was around 50 grams of carbohydrates per day with that group. But um, there was a lot of other things being looked at in that particular study too. But I thought that was maybe one of the more interesting pieces that came out of it, in terms of like what would maybe make someone a little more curious than just looking at like, oh, endurance athletes eat carbs, and that's just the way it is.
100%, Zach, and I think that study, and I believe it was a Prinz study actually that you're referring to, and I think it really highlighted a few things in my mind. One is, well, the individuals you're thinking about, I think they were classed as middle aged. So, and if I
Mhm.
think about the vast people that I work with, and potentially you work with as well, where we're all sort of in this age group and probably ability level that isn't necessarily elite. So what we see elite athletes quote unquote get away with may not be so favorable in the sort of middle aged, uh, competitive yet still recreational athlete, which I think a lot of us would sort of fall into that category. And we didn't know what these individuals' blood sugars were like prior to the study either. So they may well have their diet. I can't recall actually what their usual baseline diet is like, but there were no measures of blood glucose in their everyday life. So this might have just been reflective of what the individuals were experiencing before coming into the study also. And then, you know, I mean, we often look at body size as a reflection of health. And whilst it certainly is one indicator in certain populations of how healthy an individual is, as an athlete, we can't use that as our determining factor because of all of these, because you can still have metabolic challenges and as a lean individual. And so, sort of understanding that and being aware of that, I think is valuable because so many times we just think, oh, if we're like leaner or smaller, then we can sort of get away with eating the junk food that our training affords us. In terms of overall caloric balance and maintaining a body weight that would be considered healthy. But if you don't know what's going on under the hood, then I think that is certainly something that people need to be mindful of. And I don't know actually how you feel about this, but I am actually quite a fan of slapping a glucose monitor on someone and just seeing how they respond in their everyday life to just not just the food that they eat, but the sleep that they get and the stress of the training and stuff like that. Because if we can uncover some of these metabolic challenges before they end up sort of becoming full blown conditions, then you're actually doing a lot in that preventative health space and you're keeping someone healthy, which is ultimately what you would want.
Mhm. With continuous glucose monitors, I think they're great tools. I think they're definitely something that require a bit of upfront education for a
Mm.
person to kinda make the right it's gonna give you some information, right? And it's gonna not give you other information. So,
Yeah.
if you start kind of thinking about it through the lens of just that one piece, then you could run into problems, or if you look at it too acutely, uh where it's like you're freaking out about one glucose spike that kinda comes back down, and then that's driving all your decision making that could potentially make it, uh, trying to solve a problem that's not really there. But a lot of
Yeah.
that stuff can just be like, I think, I mean, it's like any tool, right? It can be misused, and then you end up getting something that you weren't looking for out of it. But yeah, when done right, I think like let's take that example of those 10 athletes where 3 of them had pre-diabetic levels of blood glucose. Something like that could help them tease some of that information out to find out,
Mm.
like, okay, well, was this just a one-time thing that was higher for one reason or another, like the stress of participating in a study or something like that.
Yeah.
They're gonna know that with by wearing a continuous glucose monitor. Or let's say that they do find out that they are sitting high fasting blood glucose and they wanna try to remedy it. If they have the continuous glucose monitor on for a few weeks and they're kind of continuing that pattern that resulted in that, they can see what is actually moving the needle the most with that, and then start maybe like taking care of the bigger movers first versus trying to like overhaul things and guess at what's going to work and what's not going to work.
Yeah, completely. And there are like so many, if we just staying on that point, like there are so many things that people can do. Both like just even small changes to their activity and diet that can make a really measurable difference in their overall blood sugar management, right? And it might be, if you're an endurance athlete and you do all of your training in the morning but are largely sedentary, then even making small shifts in your non-exercise activity can make big differences to your blood sugar. Raw apple cider vinegar before a meal can help lower that postprandial blood sugar response. Yeah, so you're right. Like there are plenty of things which you can trial when you've got it in front of you to make sure that, or to sort of get things back into line. But that's such a good point that you raised, that the education piece around how useful it is, but also how it fits in the context of everything else, because you can't just chase the lowest blood glucose level because other things will fall out of whack if that's your only sort of outcome that you're interested in.